Cuba will show us how to grow food without synthetic fertilizer. Who would have thought? Cuba, our friendly neighbor to the south, huh? Let's take a look. This is so friggin'. These people are literally, the greens are just commies. That's why we call them watermelons. They're green on the outside, but they're dark, dark red on the end. They're just commies, man. It's like Rage Against the Machine. I was reading something about Rage Against the Machine yesterday. People are finally realizing that Rage Against the Machine is just a commie garage band. I said, where you been, dude? Chomsky is a commie. These guys aren't anarchists, aren't for freedom. They're just commies, is what they are. And the Greens are just commies. Sadly, the Greens are financed by a well-financed group of hedge fund managers, Jeremy Grantham, and these types who can cause real damage. Chomsky a little bit, Rage Against the Machine, not much. But the hedge fund guys, the Jeremy Granthams of the world, they can cause real chaos and damage, 100%. They got the money. You and I don't. And the Jeremy Granthams of the world, they're with GMO. They're still flying, not genetically modified organisms, but they're still flying all over the world. They want a fiefdom, essentially, the Greens. They want a fiefdom. It's like Hunger Games. You live over here, and we're going to live in luxury. At the end of the day, it's better be us than them, because that's not a good way to live. But still, I'd rather be us and have less of them in terms of their wealth dominating our livelihoods. All right. So let's see what we got. Cuba shows we can grow food without fertilizer. According to Carbon Brief, the success of organic farming in Cuba demonstrates that Sri Lanka failure was caused by incompetence, not by a lack of agricultural chemicals. What does the world's reliance on fertilizers mean for climate change, according to Carbon Brief? The global production of fertilizers is responsible for 1.4% of the annual CO2 emissions. Wait, do we want green or do we not want green? Because CO2 is green. CO2 and nitrogen, synthetic fertilizer, nitrogen. You want your plants to get green, you put some nitrogen on there. That's a fact. CO2 is a natural fertilizer for plants. So if we are green, we want CO2, but not in this day and age. Let's see. Fertilizer use is a major contributor of non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. Methane, water vapor, nitrous oxide. Now scientists or farmers are faced with a new dilemma. It's a weird dilemma. I always remember dilemma being D-I-L-E-M-N-A. If you do too, that is Mandela effect. It got changed. Some are trying to end their fertilizer use altogether, while others are looking at how to reduce the amount of nutrients by optimizing fertilizer application. Over recent decades, several countries attempted to move away from synthetic fertilizer. Some can provide a roadmap for doing so successfully. Cuba's one. Still under blockade from the U.S. and without another source of agrochemicals or mechanized equipment, was forced to find a new way to farm. In the decades since, they've adopted agroecological farming methods at scale. Why they still drive vehicles you can change with carburetors and stuff. Meanwhile, the water quality of its rivers and waterways have improved significantly since agroecology became the norm. However, the attempted transition from the synthetic inputs in Sri Lanka went markedly less smoothly, because the Sri Lanka's president announced a ban on the import of agrochemicals in 2021 in an attempt to make the country's agriculture more sustainable. But the agriculture economists in Sri Lanka warned the president that yields in farms would drop precipitously and food insecurity would rise as a result of that policy. And the decision was met with widespread protest. He soon walked back some of the provisions of the ban, but protests have continued as a result of rising food prices and shortages. But a livestock farmer in Arkansas and a soil scientist tells Carbon Brief that farmers that she knows and works with have switched to organic farming are receiving comparable yields with those who use conventional methods. The claim that Cuba, this is where the good guys talk, that other stuff is fake. The claim that Cuba is an organic agricultural miracle is a dangerous fiction. Even The Guardian, a left-wing rag in the UK, admits Cuba uses a lot of imported agriculture chemicals. So here's Roger Atwood in 2017 in The Guardian, a left-wing rag. Cuba has never been able to feed itself, ever. It currently imports 60 to 80% of the food it consumes at a cost of about $2 billion a year. 2/3 of its corn is imported and a similar amount of its rice, the latter mainly from Vietnam and Brazil. At markets around the country, sacks of rice can be seen piled to the rafters. Cubans love bread, but wheat doesn't grow well in the tropical climate, so that has to be imported as well, mostly from El Gringo. It's sad that this immense majority of farmers in Cuba still use pesticides and chemical fertilizers. They're poison and enter our food, says some clown. He's proud of the fact he never uses chemicals of any kind, yet he's not sure his farm would ever gain certification as organic. The land in his province was once planted with tobacco, which has a reputation for high reliance on pesticides. Chemical residues from other crops wash in from the neighboring farms with the rain. Notice the pattern. Communism isn't a failure, it just is never done right. Climate models are correct, but the predicted rapid warming is masked by natural variation. And now the claim that organic farming failed in Sri Lanka because of incompetence, they just follow the wrong roadmap. But we only have different leaders in charge, Josh. It's bad enough when the academics promoting such ideas were just driving up the cost of home heating and gasoline with their climate alarmism, but now they're focusing their attack on food. Most confirmation that the Cuban or is an organic farming success story is nonsense. Cuba just had their worst sugar harvest in over a century. The report, which cited a spokesman for Cuba, the state-run sugar company, blamed the shortfall primarily on a lack of inputs, including oxygen for sugar production, fertilizers, pesticides, fuel, and spare parts. The report said that only 37% of the necessary herbicides and pesticides were available for the season. All right, as always, the righteous people in the West who get to live a nice life, they say Cuba's got the way to go. So check this out. Will lack food even when war is ended. Arthur Maltby points out withdrawal of men from agriculture will be long felt. Almost like war is good for the powers that be. So let's check this out. Arthur Maltby is an English merchant who arrived yesterday from London on a business visit. He said that food shortage was universal and would continue for some years after the war is over. Economy in food, he said, is dictated by necessity. Millions of men have been withdrawn from production in Europe and still need feeding. In England, men not released have been told to help the farmers. And in France, the situation is so serious that soldiers had to be released from duty, fighting crazy wars, in order to go work the field. Both France and Italy, which formerly produced nearly all their own food, will now have to buy it. In spite of the war wastage of men, the population in England has increased every week. Mr. Maltby said the needs of the war had aroused the English farmers to discard all their old conservative methods of tilling the ground and adopt motor power and the latest types of agricultural machinery. The needs of the war have told the English farmers to get rid of the conservative ways to do it, i.e. organic, and adopt motor power and the latest types of agriculture. The results have been so surprising to them that they would never go back to the old-fashioned farming of their ancestors. This is from in 1917, as the war was going crazy in Europe. If you want food, the modern agriculture is the way to do it. Now, I will tell you, there's lots of issues with that, for sure. But to sit there and say organic, are you freaking nuts, dudes? Organic's going to feed us all? You're crazy. It's freaking idiotic to think that. We have evidence after evidence after evidence. You cannot raise a country on organic. You just can't. It's dumb. Now, does that mean we shouldn't do organic where we can? Absolutely. I don't buy organic because I don't buy the hype. Anytime you got a USDA stamp on it, I know it's corrupt. You can do regenerative. I get all that. Trust me. I've been following this industry for a long, long time. With that said, the best thing you can do is try to grow your own garden. But my garden isn't all that. I mean, I got it. It's not going to feed me and my family, dude. It's not. But if you can buy something from someone local who's doing grass-fed without the hormones, without the synthetic fertilizer, it's going to cost more because they have to grow more. They have to use more land for less bounty. That's just a fact. The nice thing about synthetic fertilizers, lighter garden and whatnot, nitrogen, NPK and all that, is the facts are you can grow more food and GMOs on less piece of land. And when you're freaking out when you're starving Marvin, you don't care if it's GMOs or not. You just want to feed. Anyway, it's such a clown show. And Cuba's leading the way. Never heard that before, because remember, Cuba, there's no one illiterate there. They're all literate and they all have free health care. Yeah, you've been down to Cuba healthcare there, guy. Let me get a book on capitalism in Cuba. See how long that lasts. Yeah, freaking clowns. All right, see you.